Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Ken.
Hey, Ken. Good
It's
night.
good to see everyone. Welcome, everyone. Michael and Stan, and as always, Dr. Ricks. And welcome to the audience, our viewers, and welcome to episode 468, if you can believe it. End Time Prophecies, Britain and American Current Trends, Part 1. And in a couple of months, we'll have our 10th year anniversary.
Oh, unbelievable.
Sometime in April.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Just to let you know, we got to come up with something special that night. I have no idea what, but we need to do
And
something.
we're getting younger all the time, right, Ken?
Yeah, go back and I went back and looked at some of those from 10 years ago. Man, have I aged. Gotten a lot fatter and a lot older.
You know, the secret is you move the camera farther away each year.
Yeah, that's what I should do.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
My arm ain't long enough. All right, Dr. Ricks, if you would start us out, that would be great.
Okay. This young is 5'3" and pleasantly plump. He had a little minor accident. His mother brought him to the emergency room, and the nurse asked him his height and weight. He said, "I'm 5'10", about 145 pounds. And the nurses looked a little, puzzled. His mother leaned over him and she said, "Sweetheart, remember, this is not the internet." This is an old favorite. Mr. Doofus needed some extra money, so I went door to door. I went to this guy's house. Looked like he had money, and he said, "Look, I'll only charge you $50 to paint your Porsche." He said, "I have some old paint over there in the corner, and $50, sure, do it." And closed the door. And the rich guy's wife said, "You're really cheating this guy. It'll take at least 4 hours to paint our porch. And it's just not fair." Well, he's dumb enough to agree to it, so what? Half an hour later, he rings the doorbell and said he's finished. And the guy said, "How can you be finished in half an hour?" He says, Mr. Dew says, "You thought you had a Porsche. You actually had a Ferrari."
Ouch.
Smaller surface to dump paint on. Here's an old favorite. I like it. An 80-year-old woman marries a funeral parlor, and the newspaper reporter says, "Well, 80, and you've been married 4 times? How can you explain this is your 4th marriage?" She says, "Well, my first marriage was a banker. My second marriage was to a barker at a circus. The third marriage was to a cleric. So you see, it was 1 for the money, 2 for the show, 3 to get ready, and 4 to go." Okay, just a few quick ones, and then we'll get to the important stuff. This nice young couple wanted to get married, and they wanted to use the library, but they couldn't. The reason why? The library was all booked up. This is a cute one. What would it be like if James Bond dealt in pickles? Answer: he'd have a license to deal.
Oh, no.
All right.
A license to deal. I like that one.
Oh, man.
2 more of the really, really groaners. Why did the ducks cross the road? It was the chicken's day off. And the last
They're
one.
turning on.
Why did the turkey cross the road? Answer: to let everybody know that he wasn't chicken.
All right.
Okay, now we had a little groaning. Now we'll get to the serious business here. Well, you
The
all
end of the world and all that.
yeah. Well, we believe, and we'll elaborate even more next Friday. But we believe in um, there's an empire. The Holy Roman Empire is the last of the four beasts of Daniel to come to life. And if you were to look at that scenario, that is, the king of the south pushed up the king of the north, and America is not mentioned. Any major invasion, the first thing the ambassador says, well, what will the Americans do? So the only conclusion you can come to that is that America and British hegemony in the world is gone. Now you're going to say, America, the world's only superpower? Yes, we're on. The question is, how will we decline? How fast will we decline? And what trends can we watch? Because we're watching trends. And first thing I want to just say is, a lot of people love the idea of one big, giant world government that can solve all our problems and take care of people. You know that God says one big world government is dangerous?
Yeah, to add to your opening comments there, Dr. Ricks, one of the first things that came to my mind when I read that about Israel and their decline that in the very end is certainly the scriptures that are mentioned in Jeremiah, where especially like Isaiah the 10th chapter and Jeremiah, where it mentions that he will regather the captivity of Israel and Judah, that he would regather those nations again from the four corners of the earth. And obviously it gives a description of Israel being in a state of captivity. And he says, I will recover again the second time the house of Israel and the house of Judah, from all over the world. So they will be, I guess, in some sort of a decline situation. And I wanted to just give some scriptures that back that up for those that might not understand that the prophecies that talk about Israel in the time of the end will be in a state of what Jeremiah called a time of Jacob's trouble. And if you understand who Jacob is, of course, that was Israel, his name was changed to Israel. And of course, he was the father of all the Israelites, the nation of Ephraim and Manasseh, as they would become under Joseph. I just wanted to throw that in there so people would be able to identify with those scriptures that talk about Israel at the time of the end.
Yeah, definitely. If you don't have that knowledge and, you read Israel, and you look at the Middle East and, there's Israel right there. I mean, that's part of it, definitely, but it's not the whole picture.
And I might just say this, the Anglo-Saxons are at least a big part of the lost 10 tribes of Israel. And a lot of people will criticize that theory, saying, well, that's just ethnic bias and racism. And here's what I would add to that point. Even if people, if you go back late 1800s especially, when a lot of early 20th century, a lot of bad ideas are running around. Just because some people got the big head and thought they were greater than they really were. Like, if you want to read something funny, read what the experts were saying before World War I. They were too enlightened, et cetera, to have a big world war. It just won't happen. We're too smart. I know you laugh at that when you see the disaster of World War I. Oh, speaking of World War I, those things in East Palestine, Ohio, that mushroom cloud? Well, the major chemicals in that were the chemicals used in gas warfare in World War I, plus some additional caustic chemicals. They're even more dangerous. In other words, the stuff that they ignited in East Prairie, they used to kill people in the trenches in World War I. Mm-hmm. That'll give you something to think about. And you want to drink the water?
Not me.
Well, even if you don't believe, and I've always said this, even if you don't believe in the identity of the United States and Britain as Ephraim and Manasseh, even if you don't, you still have to look at the prophecies that Jesus talked about, like in Matthew 24, where he talked about the conditions on the earth, all of the upheavals that will be happening. You know, he talked about looking back at what Daniel said, the abomination. When you see the abomination of desolation stand in the holy place, and when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, and some people might say, well, those things happened. Jerusalem was surrounded by armies in 70 AD when Titus invaded and destroyed Jerusalem. But Jesus was talking about in light of his second coming. He was actually referring to the time when he would return again at the very time of the end. And he was answering the question of his disciples who were asking about his return. So he was specifically talking about the very time of the end, or the end of the age. And I always liked what Mr. Armstrong always clarified was, yeah, they've always had bad times. They've always had famine. There's always been war. There's always been all kinds of atrocities. I read the other day about a meteor shower in the 1800s. It was like a glitter falling from the sky. There were so many of you could see 10,000 per hour. People thought that was the end of the world. But one thing that Jesus said, that he said it was going to be unlike any other time there ever was. And if it wasn't for him stepping in and saving the world, that we would destroy all life on this planet. And we have that capacity to do that in a nuclear age and chemical and biological weapons.
And by the way, I want to add one thing. When you read the prophecies, it's quite clear that at the end there will be one stick for Judah and another stick for the lost 10 tribes of Israel. That means Israel physically, physical people, have to exist when Christ comes back. So they got to be somewhere. And here's my point. Even if people use the British Israelism theory with some bad ideas, that doesn't mean it's not true. And think about it. Bad philosophers at certain times of history say stupid stuff, but that doesn't change the truth of what God obviously. And I would just add one more point. If you study American history, the growth of America and its wealth is so spectacular, you can't accredit it to the smartness of the people. It's just too great. Here's just a thought. Did you know that from about 1805, when America was a relatively small, by their own very weak nation, just barely crossing the Appalachian Mountains, till 1898, when America became the industrial, most powerful nation in the world. Actually, by 1898, America had more industry in a whole bunch of fields like coal, steel, oil, a bunch of others, more than most of the countries in Europe added together. Now, America didn't throw its military weight around at that point in time, but that would come a little bit later. But the point is, in less than a century, they went from a little bitty 13 colonies on the coast of North America, and actually they were reaching out, Navy-wise, Hawaii, Philippines, American Navy, the first to open up Japan and the Caribbean. There's no way that isn't God's blessing.
I heard Ronald Reagan say something the other day. He told a story about a Cuban that came to this country, and I don't remember exactly the exact verbiage of the story that he told, but this Cuban said something to the effect. A reporter said, "Did you know that you're in the greatest land and the luckiest place to be?" And he said, "I'm the luckiest guy in the world because." He actually said, you Americans are the luckiest people in the world because you have a place to go to. You have a place that you can call home that's free. And the point that Ronald Reagan was saying by this story was we're like the last bastion on earth when it comes to freedom and a place to allow people a safe haven. And I really liked that story, and I think it's so true. If we let the light go out here in this country that is a Christian nation that has strong beliefs about caring for other people and protecting other country and other nations, then he said, the light will go out for 1,000 years. This is the term that he used. if we let this country fall to its knees. I think he's absolutely correct.
And that's part of the shame about our slide away from our moral beginnings, if you will. There's a lot in jeopardy because of that, and the fact that the nation was made up of largely Protestant, and Catholic, of course, hardworking Christian people in whatever denomination they may be. It says if you're Christ's, then you are Abraham's seed. You take that at face value. Where else is that lamp burning in quite the same way? You're not going to find it in India or China or anywhere like that. Even South America is even far more compromised with paganism than American Catholicism would be. I mean, comparatively, like there's still a pretty big difference there. If that light goes out, it is a big deal. It's a very big deal.
By the way, later in the program, we're going to discuss the revival at Asbury College. So hang in there and hear what we have to say. It's not that we know the answer, but it's just something to think about in line with American history. Ken, would you go to our first scripture, Genesis 11:6, please?
And the Lord said, Indeed, the people are one. Now nothing that they propose to do will be withheld from them. Confuse their language. So the Lord scattered them abroad, and they ceased building the city. Therefore its name is called Babel.
God did not want a one world ruling empire that early in the world's history. By the way, people might laugh at Babylon, but they have found in the ruins a crude electric battery. Give it a couple centuries of one government, who knows what they might have come up with.
Yeah, I always thought that verse, and nothing shall be withheld from them, is very interesting, because the kind of advancement that we've had in the world, once the language barriers have been broken down and you have more and more communication between the most intelligent people in the world. I mean, think of how far we've come in a very few hundred years. And there's no reason why that couldn't have happened before. You know what I mean? We're still starting with the same raw materials. It just didn't.
One of the things I saw when I was in the Louvre Museum was an Egyptian display, and in there was a glass bottle. It looked like the color of an old Coca-Cola bottle, that light green glass, but it was actually a glass bottle. And I was dumbfounded that there was here was something from 3500 BC, that was, the same shape and size of a Coca-Cola bottle. It's a lot smaller, but here it was. The other thing I wanted, good point, Michael, when you talk about unifying elements of these, big nations or conglomerate of nations of the world, things that gather people and cause them to be unified were the same things that happened like in ancient Rome, like sports and entertainment. And, Babylon was a wealthy city, and their monetary system was, and the riches that were in the city all contributed to them being unified. And of course, every bit of it also led to decadence and sinful things that they were doing in their society. Yes. And that's what God frowned on. Obviously, they were sinful in God's eyes.
Yeah, when we get all packed close together like this, a bad apple, if you will, touches a lot more good apples than maybe it otherwise would. It's not so spread out. It's easier for, evil's influence to infect the whole, I think. I mean, look at what's happened with the internet. You could say the internet in itself is benign. It's a tool, right? It could be used for good or for evil, and it is used for good. We're using it for good right now. But is that the majority of what it's used for? Probably not. I would say.
Another thought too is when God confused the languages, it was actually a merciful act by him to try to push people away or steer them away from the evil that they were destined to do. They were all fixing to go over the cliff. And by doing so, he saved 99% of them from destruction, because they went in different directions of the world and started over again on their own, and took them 1,000 years to get back to where they were in Babylon, for pity's sake.
It's an interesting way to look at it, yeah.
Yeah. He didn't. He did the world a favor. All kinds of things. AIDS could have been developed if it hadn't been for certain plagues God unleashed much sooner when the world couldn't have handled it so well. And I was looking at Romans 11:32. Let's read that, Ken. I want to discuss this for a minute as we look toward the future.
For God has committed them all to disobedience, that he might have mercy on all. Oh, the depth of the riches, both of the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgments and his ways past finding out. For who has known the mind of the Lord?
Two things occur to me. One is we have to remain humble. There will be some surprises. We're not going to get everything right. But if we stay solid with the Bible, over time we'll see the truth clearer and clearer. But nobody can be sure, understanding all that God's going to do, that is tricky business. As many people who thought they knew over the past have been as wrong as they could be.
Well, think about why Paul wrote that statement there. His frustration was over the fact that his own people rejected the gospel message. I think about how Paul must have felt laying there at night sometime, thinking he tried to preach the gospel message to the Israelites and they rejected it. And he finally said, I'm going to go out into the world and preach the gospel anyway. And I'm going to leave my people behind, the Israelites. And he did that. And his frustration in knowing that God blinded Israel so that they would be jealous of the Gentiles and that they would be grafted back in eventually. This is the result of that thought process, that when he said, oh, who can know the mind of God? And God is so gracious and merciful. Who can understand the depths of God and what his plan is, that he's going to eventually have, he even said that all Israel shall be saved. And, that was, I think, out of his heart, he felt and knew that.
And out of his mercy, he says, well, if they're not going to obey now, I'll just leave them in darkness so I can better forgive them in the future.
There's a scripture from before the flood. It's before the flood. It's Genesis 6:3. He says, my spirit will not always strive with man or contend or prevail. I've read it rendered prevail before, but his years will be 120. However it's rendered right there. He knows our weaknesses and that we're all going to fall short, and we are all have all been disobedient at some point in time, and so we all require that mercy. And it's very humbling. It is a very leveling thing.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to try to look at the spiritual condition at the end of the age and measure how close are we to that decline. America's obviously been a religious spiritual leader in the world. You will probably already know most of the world's charity, most of the world's missionaries have been sent from America, and maybe Britain is second in missionary and charity, but America is far, far ahead in all those categories. But how close are we to the great moral decline that is predicted at the end of this age? One of the things that we believe is that Satan wants to be worshiped like God. And the one way to do it is he'll get an evil dictator he will possess. And through worshiping of that man, we'll be worshiping him. And that's his goal. And if we understand Revelation correctly, Satan for a few short years will achieve that goal.
It says in the Bible that when the Son of Man cometh, will he find faith on the earth? And there's all these scriptures that talk about, the love of many shall wax cold. But in your comment about Satan, that was the one thing Satan wanted Jesus to do was, I'll give it all to you if you will only fall down and worship me. And that proves your point, Dr. Ricks, that He absolutely wants that worship from even Jesus himself, and he'll do anything he can to achieve that goal, including deception and making signs, having signs, and like you said, possessing some dictator that will be charismatic enough to make people believe that they're worshiping God.
I heard them talking about how good AI is. In the future, they're going to build a statue of the beast that will be able to talk. I think we might have mentioned that last week. I can see with the AI, if they improve it a little bit, the statue could talk and be programmed by the beast programmers to say what he wants it to say. I guess that would, I don't know, it wouldn't impress me, but I guess that would impress a lot of people, right?
There's some pretty scary potentialities in there, and you can read any number of things. People are having conversations with these chatbots and stuff, and it gets pretty dark and weird from time to time. And if you didn't know better, maybe you would think it was alive. And lonely folks are probably sitting around, chatting back and forth with it right now. It's weird. It's a weird thing.
Did you see the one about the one Bing Microsoft did?
Yeah, I read that today. Yeah.
That was creepy.
It was creepy.
I don't know if it's true or not, but it was creepy.
What was creepy about it?
It talked about like Carl Jung's theory of your I forget what you called your alternate self. That's not quite it. Your shadow self. That's it. Like not the you that you present to the world, but how you really feel inside. This guy was trying to draw the thing out about what it really thought about itself, and all the stuff the thing said was terribly, terribly frightening. But if you consider what it is, it's a program that searches the internet and, can consume all of this stuff in the blink of an eye and spit it all back out to you. And so what is it going to read about what people are worried about AI, about, the fears behind it and all that, is that it's going to turn evil and that it's going to, start working for itself and all that. So the fact that it spit that back out, yeah, it's scary, but it's just meeting our expectations about what is scary about AI, the dark side of it, if you will. So.
Well, the capabilities of it.
It's not a real person. Just
well, here's the downfall of it. I mean, the contribution that everybody has made by dumping their whole lives out on social media has allowed this thing to look into the hearts and minds and the spending practices and the things we like to watch, good or bad. We've given that information out on social media and by a vast majority of the population now. So all they had to do was write a program that would look, and I wouldn't be surprised. They're even talking about in China and places now where they can use facial recognition, and they're even talking about being able to see what you think. Now, I don't know how they do that other than behavior or eye movement or facial expressions, but they really can tell if you're angry or you're happy at work or you're mad, or if they mention a name and it causes some kind of reaction, and they attribute it to almost being able to read your thoughts, and that can be very powerful. So if you want to talk about things that could contribute to this beast power having power, I think first of all would be something like an economic system that he would have control over, like a digital currency, which we know is probably going to be in the offing. And of course, the riches and the wealth that come along with it, just like it did in ancient Babylon. They were promised wealth, they were promised riches, they had jobs, they had everything a person could, every kind of decadence as you described here. And they sold themselves to that system. And that is, maybe we will see that if it contributes to the wealth of every individual that participates. And if you read the book of Revelation, it seems to indicate they became wealthy beyond their belief by giving themselves over to this beast power. And that's going to be hard to resist for the average person who's struggling to make it, spending $800 a month on groceries. Right. To not be a part of that system, I mean, it's going to be a carrot dangling out there for everyone, I believe, and it's very attractive and very in vogue, if you will.
And
yeah, what you described was basically Minority Report with thought crimes. And
Yeah.
that AI that Michael was talking
Street
about
crime.
was basically Cyberdyne going self-aware,
You know, they say
from
they even claim that that you can it'll spit back a report for you of some subject within 4 or 5 seconds. I mean, paragraph after paragraph,
Oh
in
yeah.
complete description that you can even write books. You can write songs with lyrics, even artwork. All
Art.
of this is digitally enhanced, and it's going to be hard to determine what is real human intervention and what is fake anymore, because it'll be digitally created.
The problem is, well, I know in the art world they hate
Yeah.
it because it really doesn't create its own art.
Yeah.
It just steals elements of other
Yeah.
people's art and uses that because it has no creative process. So, but yeah, I mean, yeah, it's it's a mess. But I just want to mention that article because it was a little creepy. It took it a very short time to go from this AI that didn't know anything to straight up Skynet in a really short period of time.
Yeah, in the movie, yeah. But think about it. Let's assume that this dictator will have great programmers under his thumb and whatever else he needed. They can use that to rule over the people in a way that never could have been done in the past.
And it has an air of fairness and impartiality to it. It's not a person. It shouldn't be biased. It's just dealing with information, and that's a frightening thing. Not that bias can't be worked into it or that it won't be a part of it. It inevitably will be. But
Think about this: what if he uses this system and he convinces people that it is all powerful and all knowledge and all wisdom, and it actually is God, and the people that worship that system will believe that they are actually worshiping God. That would be the ultimate deception Satan would use to put himself in the place of God.
And that's almost exactly what Klaus Schwab said this week about these mega tech companies and how they're going to be the ones ruling the world. It's exactly what he said.
By the way, let's read Isaiah 14:13 and Revelation 13. Now I want to tag on to what you just said, to what these scriptures say about what the devil and the beast might do in the future.
For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High.
Okay, this is the final dictate. And then Revelation 13:4, please.
So they worshipped the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And he was given authority to continue for 42 months. Then he opened his mouth to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle.
Now, who is like the beast? Now, here's a possibility. I believe it's true. The devil does not have a counterpart to the Holy Spirit. So he can't do all the stuff that God can. But here's the but part. If he can set up a surveillance state dictatorship, and they can have devices in your home spying on you, using your cell phone to spy on you. And also they can do what the communists did. And I think the Stasi's in East Germany, I know they did it in Vietnam. They have neighbors spying on each other and children spying on their parents. It's almost as if maybe the devil can't see what everybody's doing, but his extended deep state with all that surveillance will allow the devil to have almost the reach like the Holy Spirit would have. I mean, in a sense, like, oh, these people are going to church on the wrong day. You know what I mean? One of your neighbors will sell you out.
Well, if they could be able to gather the information at that time, I mean, we know what they can do now. What will they be able to do in 5 or 10 years? the information that they could gather, even using this technology we've been discussing tonight, to find out what your habits are, where you go, where do you spend your time, who do you talk to. And besides that, you're talking about a government that's going to be a economic juggernaut, that is going to be a, and he goes on to say here that who can make war with this beast power. And ultimately, the book of Revelation is talking about having an army of 200 million strong. So he's going to be not only powerful militarily, but be an economic supergiant. No one will be able to go up against him, and that's when he'll have ultimate authority in the world, and he'll be able to control every aspect. And I guess the next thought in my mind I mentioned earlier was the economic impact of a digital currency. So if they could control your spending, whether you are able to spend or not, and that's already been used against the people of the world, then he's going to have a lot of authority. If he can cut your bank card off from spending your grocery money this month because you didn't follow the state program, then he could have pretty scary authority over people.
Although place of safety is not our topic, but I would just tell people always worry about, well, how will God protect us, and where will he protect us? I say it's not so important how God will do it. What's important is we want to be on God's side, so we'll be the ones protected. Worthy is maybe not the right term, but those people that have chosen God, and God knows they don't, there'll be a few heroic martyrs. I'm not putting those people down, but if you want to be protected from all this, you need to get on God's side now, not wait till the last second.
Jesus said in his own words, even in the Olivet prophecy, when he was talking about all these horrible events, he said, those that endure to the end, the same shall be saved. Right out of his mouth. I mean, and of course, we know in the book of Revelation, it talks about the sealing of the 144,000 and those that will be protected. And it even talks about the, church going into the wilderness where they're protected for a time and half a time. And we just read here that it's talking about this 42-month period. The Bible talks about 42 months or 1,260 days. The book of Daniel talks about a time of times. We think those are all talking about that same 3.5 year period of time when there will be great trouble on the earth, and the preaching of the gospel message will go out by these two witnesses at some point during that time, and that God is going to protect his people. And I'll add the last thought here about that is that God protected the nation of Israel in Egypt while all the plagues were falling down upon them. Mm-hmm. And so he can protect us in the 21st century if the world comes apart at the seams.
Yeah. And that's what we want to strive for, God's protection. Now, I actually believe some of us will pass away before the end. And that's, of course, being in the grave in Christ's hands is a safe place to be. But we still want to be on God's side and get his protection, because even the people in the world are going to suffer a lot when you go through the book of Revelation. It's the people that God seals, and we want to be among those protected. The one good thing about this is this final evil combination will only last 3.5 years, at least most of their power. Maybe a little build up to it, but that's really a short time period, 3.5 years. Because they're really not going to be that compatible, like iron and they're not that compatible. 3.5 years, enough to fulfill prophecy, and then Christ is going to smash them. We'll talk about some of this stuff next week, but can we go to Revelation 13:16 and look at the economic stuff that Stan was talking about again?
He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name.
Can you go ahead and read the next section, please? Just might as well get them both together.
All right. Then I saw another angel having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on the earth, saying with a loud voice, "Fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and the springs of water."
And I believe we're going to be looking for these trends. I think the World Economic Forum is kind of moving toward using the economy to lock the whole world into one system.
The systems of the world are already interconnected, and I guess we'll see what happens. If one comes down, what happens to the rest of them. When you read about how exposed the major banking systems of the world are to each other, it's a pretty scary thing, and it sort of makes you understand why they continue bailing out nations with unsustainable practices, unsustainable fiscal practices, and give these loans and keep the whole thing kind of going together. But how long can that go on, or what outside influence could further undermine it? We're setting up like into large trade blocks again, with China and Russia on one side, and the United States and Europe on the other. But then you got India and Brazil and these other major nations on the periphery, Saudi Arabia, major players really in the grand scheme. And who knows how that shakes down.
Going on what you just said, Michael, and I may forget all the technical economic terms, but there's a banking system, and at least they talk about it in Switzerland because they're a major banker, Switzerland is, and they kicked the Russians out of the system. Well, and some of this is the Biden administration's fault. They've done things, the countries like Saudi Arabia and a few others, I can't remember all the details, but China is setting up an alternative international banking communication system with the yuan. That's China's currency. I think it's YUAN. Mm-hmm. Russia is in on it. Like you said, some of the BRIC nations are in on it. India's kind of playing both sides against the middle. I'm not sure what that means, but they're benefiting by buying a lot of Russian stuff and using them. Well, here is a possibility. The dollar is the world's reserve currency. It has been since World War II, which gives America certain economic power, and it's really a lot of other power, that America has because of that. What Biden people did, I think the way they handle the sanctions, it may actually hurt Europe's economy more than Russia's. Now, I got this off Tucker and a few other shows. I'm not sure about the accuracy because people disagree. But the ruble is coming back. Saudi Arabia is saying they will not trade oil for the first time in petrodollars, but in yuan. Then they kind of half back off because they still need America. I don't know what they're going to do, but it doesn't look good. Is it possible that all this mess will end up undermining the current financial system and the dollar as the world's reserve currency? And you're going to say, well, how's that going to affect me? Well, here's a possibility. If the dollar has less value and we buy a lot of things from overseas, that means it'll cost America more and inflation will get worse, not better. And America will be weaker on the world's financial stage and not stronger. America's been the financial giant of the world ever since, probably before World War I, but certainly afterwards. And the world finances used to revolve around London. They've been revolving around New York for about 110 or 20 years. That may change. Wall Street may no longer be. In other words, a couple more screw-ups by this administration. Have I surprised anybody?
One of the thoughts that came to my mind is we forgot to mention that we're, $36 trillion in debt in the United States. We could fall on our face at any moment with just the slightest hiccup. We were talking this week. I was talking to a young man at work, and I said, do you know that Judy and I go to the store, we buy we spend twice as much for half the people that we did when we had children at home, and we're spending, our what used to be our monthly budget for groceries per week now. And I don't know how you young folks are making it, but we have this huge, enormous debt that we're facing that could, if one downturn in our economy, it could be a horrific outcome. But also to mention what you said about these digital currencies overseas, Dr. Riggs, I heard this term used today about the digital currency being decoupled from the banking systems. Now that is a whole different concept from what we've all been used to than having banks controlling the money and having governments that can control digital currency. And that, I don't know where that's going to play out or how you even define that, but it certainly is something that may be completely different than what we're used to in growing up and being able to go down to the bank and borrow money. And now you're going to be answering to a government who has charge of the monetary digital system.
You will own nothing and you will be happy. Everything will be a service. If you want a car, you pay a price, you get a car, and it's a service. Everything becomes a service under their economic plan. You want a house, fine, but you pay so much and it's a service. And they tell you where to live, how to live, what to do.
They own it and you just lease it from them.
By the way, I wanted to go back, just the scriptures that we just read. Those were two contrasting scriptures. One of them was being, having allegiance and loyalty to this beast power. And the other one was the message that the angel said when he warned in this prophetic statement that John saw, was to worship God and give him the glory. Two opposite ends of the spectrum here. And I also wanted to make the point that, they may in fact use some sort of computer chip to identify you as a loyal servant to their system. But the fact is, it is truly giving oneself over to the, body, soul, and spirit to this beast power, and giving your will over to them is what God condemns. I mean, if they, like the scenario was brought up, if they held you down and inserted a chip in you, you don't lose your salvation because have a digital chip embedded in your skin against your will. It is giving yourself willingly over to this system that God is going to condemn.
I've said this before, I almost think the system will be in place before the beast is attached to it. And it just makes sense that they'll have that in place with the chip or whatever it is, and it'll exist and people will be on board with it, but they'll just add the component of the beast to it, so it'd be an easy thing to slide into. And you know what I mean?
Especially if he can mix religion into the mixture.
Oh yeah.
Control them both. I asked myself the question tonight about why religion? Why does he need religion if he has all of this power? Why have the beast and the false prophet when you can go, and I'll just maybe not mention, but you look at the population of some of the major church groups, Protestant church groups in our nation, and the Catholic Church as well. You're talking close to 1 billion people, over 1 billion people. So that's quite a big sector of the population of the earth that you could have influence. And and of course we know that's what was done historically down through history, even in the Roman Catholic Church and the Holy Roman Empire, as it was called. So it's all about controlling every aspect, just like Constantine did when he tried to gain power over all of the pagans and all of the Christians. He united them all under one empire.
Yeah.
Somebody mentioned a carrot earlier to lead people in. A carrot to lead people in. Rome did that, right? Plenty of benefits, free food, big parties, the entertainment, all that. God says, you worked for 6 days. As the Second Thessalonians says, you don't work, you don't eat. And yet we have a pretty bad, plague of laziness. People that are willing to take whatever they can, be it honest or otherwise, and would be just as happy to receive their monthly stipend from the government and, be entertained and watch movies and chat with their friends, and that's enough for them. Now, what if a time comes through technological advancement where a government can provide that for you? You don't need to own anything, and you can be happy. You just take what we give you and you spend it on whatever it is that you need. Your needs are met, and I think there are people that would be willing to just, fine, check out of the rat race. I just want to, have my free time. Look at what's been going on in France about raising the retirement age 2 years. I mean, they're going to burn the place down over that.
Well, what you describe is the entirety of our universities. You just described the attitude of the universities across the entire country. That's what they want. That's what they're taught, and they deserve it. They expect
entitlement.
You try hiring some of these people out of these universities. You'll find out real quick what we're up against.
By the way, you know that about 15% of young men from, I think it's age 18 to 30 something, have dropped out of the workforce. I don't know how they're doing it, but the government is somehow spreading around enough freebies like free rent and other programs I've heard about. So it's sort of like the rabble of Rome: free bread, free wine, free circus. And they're okay with not working, like you said. Now, maybe that's only, I don't know, is it 15 million or 15%? One of those numbers, but it's a large enough number. That's why there's so many job openings, not because the economy is roaring strong, because they don't want to work.
People don't want them. Yeah.
Yeah. But if we crash a train with about 10 tanker cars in your town and mix together the worst cocktail of chemicals known to man, and we light it on fire, yeah, you're on your own. You're just a bunch of white people that voted for Trump. We don't care about you.
It's not dangerous, Ken. They already said there's nothing to worry about. Your chickens, your dog, you're dying. That doesn't matter.
Yeah, hand them a glass of water and they go running.
They came in hazmat suits. That should tell you something.
Oh, that's another thing. They wear hazmat suits at night to work on this stuff. During the day, they don't. They don't want people to see. I'm serious. I'm on a group page from that town just watching all this stuff, and it's messed up. Those people are scared out of their mind, and I don't blame them one bit.
Yeah. By the way, speaking of the economics, one thing that Davos and other organizations, they're pushing the green agenda as a way to overregulate people and undermine normal capitalism, as the freedom that capitalism gives all the little businesses. And they're even trying to determine the fuel we can use, the food we can eat. And America's economies, at least two of our greatest blessings, have been an abundant agricultural system and an abundance of natural resources like fossil fuels. Do you know America has more fossil fuels in the ground than any nation in the world? Most people don't know that.
We're discovering new fields all the time. Every time the price of oil gets up high, everybody cries because the gasoline prices go up, and I feel sorry for them. But when it does go up, we have the money in the oil and gas industry to go out and do R&D, and we find new fields every time we have that spike. And that spike, thank God, doesn't last for very long, maybe a year or so, and then it starts to come back down to normal. But during that time, that's when all the work goes crazy in the oil and gas industry. We do all of our drilling. We get everything to last us for the next 8 or 10 years. That's when we drill these, and some of these wells now are going down to 12, 13, 14, 15,000 feet deep. They're horizontal wells that go out several thousand feet, and they cost $7, $8, $10 million to drill.
Wow.
And it's it's a long process to get the money back, but you can't do that when the price of gas is down at $40 a barrel. Unfortunately, you can't afford to do it. It's got to be up around $80 to $100 a barrel to have that kind of R&D.
And that's what they're undermining with stuff they're doing. Let's look at 2 Timothy 3:1-6. It's I realize that wait a minute.
First Timothy.
Is that the next scripture?
Well,
What's
that's
the next scripture?
skipping 2, yeah.
First Timothy 4.
1 Timothy 4.
Yeah.
We are getting
I'm sorry.
low on
2
time.
Timothy 4.
Now the Spirit expressly says that in later times some will depart from the faith, giving heed to deceiving spirits and doctrines of demons, forbidding to marry and commanding to abstain from foods which God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth.
You notice that food mentioned in there? They want us to actually, I saw a serious program coming out of Davos. The guy was showing all his racks of worms. They want you to seriously eat worms. And he says in the next 5 years, it'll be in school lunches, and a large percentage of our diet will be ground up worms. And I guess they flavor them and mush them up. And they believe they can even make them look a little bit like hamburger.
I saw a documentary of a guy in the United States that, you know, he mentioned he could take about 4 ingredients and make anything you wanted. You want a cookie, a Twinkie, you want a breakfast bar. He only needed about 4 ingredients, and 3 of them were man-made stuff. So it doesn't surprise
I'll pass.
me.
Yeah, nope.
Hard.
You know, the one thing I've noticed about veggie burgers, I read one label, there's so many chemicals in it. How can that possibly be good for your health?
They don't care. They're not eating them. They really don't. I don't think people don't get it, but no, they're not eating that garbage. They're eating steak and potatoes and all the good stuff. Yeah. It's just us peasants that eat the bugs and the fake.
It sounds so elitist, doesn't it?
That's because it is. They like that system.
And I was watching with the grandkids a little while back a Disney cartoon, and I realized they're pushing eating bugs. I didn't really pay much attention to it because, you know, it's just a cartoon in there. But they've been propagandizing our kids for years, and we never noticed it.
A lot.
Well,
they sure have.
It's almost like they're undermining every pillar of our society that all the great things that we grew up with, you know, the fact that our house would stay warm because we had electricity and natural gas, and to destroy all that it makes no sense at all why they would do it. But they're going to pursue their agenda to push the Green Deal, I guess, is their objective.
Yeah. Satan hates all of us, so he's using them to destroy us all.
Ken, could you read our next scripture?
Now the Spirit expressly says that in later times some will depart from the faith, giving heed to deceiving spirits and doctrines of... Did I already read that?
I think so.
Right.
The next one
Try
after
that
that.
again. All right. But evil men and impostors will grow worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived.
And that's the moral decadence that we will be seeing as we get close to the end. The question is...
Will be? We're living it.
The question is...
Will be? That's a daily
I wrote
occurrence.
in my notes here, it's the exact characteristics of our society today.
Yeah. We can see that in the rearview mirror, man.
So my only thought is it possible we could overreact to it and think things are worse than they are, and the end is coming tomorrow when, as bad as it is now, it's going to get much worse? I'm just saying that. I really don't know. What are you, any thoughts, Ken?
Yeah, I think we got a long way to go yet. I mean, we're going to be in this for a while. This mess that we're in, And I think it's going to take a little bit more to get us as bad as it needs to be. But what do I know? But it just feels like it's going to be a while yet.
I would say read why God was fed up with all the Canaanites before he sent the Israelites into the promised land, the list of the things that we're doing there. If you can stomach it, study a little bit about some of their practices and stuff. It'll turn your stomach. It'll absolutely turn your stomach. And things are really bad here, I would think so, but it's nothing on that level. I don't believe.
Well, the other thing is too is that God give mankind all the time in the world to turn around. He won't do anything abruptly. He will let it go and the Bible even talks to, it uses the description that those Canaanites and those nations that lived in the land, it says that their cup was full. They had gotten to the point where there was nothing left but wickedness. It was overflowing their cup, and God had no choice but to exact judgment upon them. And he won't do that to America until we are at that same place, I believe.
Yeah, I believe what you both just mentioned something, and I think we see these things in the leadership and the self-proclaimed elites, and they're trying to push their debauchery and sickness into mainstream society. We see that with some of the things going on today, like all the garbage that kids are being taught to, change your gender, to children, and they're trying to push this into mainstream now. They're trying to corrupt the rest of the planet with with their sickness. And we're not there yet. I mean, the people of this country and a large part of the world are rejecting this stuff right now, but they're just going to keep pushing and pushing and breaking people down. And, if you don't believe this way, like you said earlier, we're not going to let you click on that buy button the next time you want to, order a steak or something. We're just going to, cut you off, financially from doing that transaction. Or you already had enough Twinkies this month. No more Twinkies for you. Whatever, and no more gas this month or whatever. But I just see that there is the leadership in our society, right or left, are already there. They're trying to force the rest of the planet to get to where they're at. They want.
Say there's a good pivot right there into you wanted to talk about the revival, Dr. Ricks, and that feeding off itself and people coming in from all over and all that. And I feel like as they're pushing it very hard, like Ken's talking about, but not everybody's ready for that. And it is causing somewhat of a reaction. I mean, it's causing people who know and who are ready to resist that quote unquote progress to become more entrenched in a not me, like not ever, not here type of way. And it's going to lead to, some revival. And maybe this is maybe that's a symptom of this. A lot of people are not ready to go there.
That's a good
They're
point.
regurgitating this trash and they're digging in.
Well,
I heard that the parents, most parents do not want them having drag queens strip shows for little kindergartens, first, second, and third grade.
What I was going to say is that, what they could do in the 50s and 60s and 70s can be done now through the superhighway of social media and the platforms that they have to distribute whatever kind of doctrine that they're trying to put out there. But it also has been put forth in the past that when this does happen, there could be a very hard right turn in our country, and it'll be a divisive turn for whatever percentage of the people that are still have some sort of attachment to God and God's laws and God's ways. And it'll be a huge divide between the two. And that could really set off some, conflict within our country in a large degree.
And you can see that
I
building.
almost think that's the plan.
Yeah.
Yes.
Divide.
That's the plan.
Yeah, there you go.
That's if it's a religious revival, it won't be a true Christian religious revival. I think you know where the beast wants to go with that, and I think that's that's the ultimate plan, and that's where we get the verse that even the elect would get fooled if it wasn't for God's intervention.
I had a Protestant tell me one time, this was not several years, just a few short years ago, say he was watching Pope Francis, and he said, "Oh, isn't it wonderful?" And he'd heard about one of the Protestant groups here in the United States. It was going back to rejoin with the Catholic Church. And he said, "Oh, isn't it wonderful that there's this new wave of, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Here was someone who was a Protestant that was beginning to accept the idea of going back to the mother church. And that could certainly look like a move to the right, look like a move toward God's ways when it's actually going into the opposite direction."
Now, I did hear this about Asbury College and their revival. This writer claimed that every 50, 60, or 70 years in American history, they have a Protestant revival. They had one in the 1750s before the American Revolution, one in the 1830s and 40s. It might have even, they thought Christ was coming back. One at the end of the 19th century. And then, of course, the Jesus movement in the 1970s. He says, we're overdue for one. So there are two ways of looking at it. In one sense, it's certainly good to have people interested in Christ and the Bible again, especially young people. That's good. But they'll end up reinforcing some doctrines like glossolalia, probably, that's not biblical. But on the whole, good or bad, I'm kind of not sure. I tend to think it's good if young people at least think about the Bible, but I'm not certain. I want to get your feeling. What do you think, Michael?
It's hard to say. I mean, where does it end? Where is it going to end up? That's really the question. I don't know how much good the Jesus movement in the 70s did overall, right? I didn't live through that. What would your opinion of that be? I've heard of that. It seems like an odd spinoff from, your typical hippieism or something, though I've heard of it.
It may have strengthened some Protestant churches, I think, but I won't guarantee that for sure. That's the best I can say. And if they're thinking about the Bible, then maybe they're more likely to look at some of our challenges to biblical orthodoxy. But I'm not sure that either. Any thoughts, Dan?
Well, I certainly admonish any private, repentance that someone would have. What I would caution, though, is the open show. And there are people coming in from all over, from Hawaii. They're coming from all over the world now, Switzerland and other places, to fly in here because they want to be a part of this, so-called movement. But, if you'll remember, the Pharisees wanted to see a magic show too. They wanted to see a sign. They wanted to see some great miracle performed. And Jesus said, you're not going to get to see that because you're here for the wrong reason. So that's what I would caution people about this movement. It may continue on. It may, die on the vine. But, true repentance is something of the heart, and it is a direct relationship between you and God personally. You don't have to go to a tent revival in order to accomplish that. Like I said, I admonish, if it is truly repentance, but to have an open show, I would caution people against it.
Ken, I want to pass over 2 Timothy 3. We can maybe come back to that next week about how far have we slipped. I think the next scripture is Proverbs 16:18. Is that correct? Let's go ahead and read Proverbs 16:18 if we can.
Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall.
Here's what we believe. That is, when communism fell in 1989 through 91, partly because the pressure from Reagan and the stupidity of the system, the socialist communists in the West, including Western Europe and America and American universities, they didn't exactly admit that their system was wrong and give up. Maybe the wrong people were in charge. And they basically said, we're going to relabel our movement we'll become progressives. And we'll be pushing instead of for the way the communists did things, we'll be pushing for social justice instead of real justice. And admittedly, doesn't that sound wonderful? Social justice and equity. It sounds good. It's like a lot of things with communism. There are unintended consequences to that sort of thing.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, every time I hear that verse, I think of Pride Month.
Well, I think about what came to my mind was, the blue state, red state at one time was reversed in our history. Did you know that? And when it became unpopular to be one color, it was switched. It's almost like they take on this disguise of what is good, but they're things that are evil that are under the surface. And the same old, I guess you would call it the characteristics of Satan. He always tries to appear as a sheep, but inside he's a ravenous wolf, and that seems to be the case over and over again. You can always see that characteristic repeated over and over in history.
Yeah, didn't they do that back in like the 80s?
Yeah.
They switched the red and the blue. I remember the time. I remember the night I seen it.
No.
I was yelling at the television.
Why would they do that? I mean, why? And why would the other party give in to that? I mean, it's almost to confuse people and to deliberately deceive. It was beyond me that happened. But
The Republicans just don't
the commies
fight.
didn't want to be seen as red. The commies didn't want to be seen as red because everybody called them that anyway.
Let's change our color.
And the Republicans just seem to go along with stuff they shouldn't. It makes you wonder about some of them as being rhinos. But let's read Isaiah 59:14. I want to talk about this social justice for a few minutes.
Didn't Romney sit with the Democrats the other night during the...
I can't even remember. Did he?
I think he did.
I know he can't be trusted.
No.
I think I saw an article about that.
And judgment is turned away backward, and justice standeth afar off. For truth is fallen in the street, and equity cannot enter.
By the way, the guy that shot up Michigan State should have been in prison. I won't go into the details, but a George Soros DA gave him a slap on the wrist, let him out, no time, nothing to worry about. And what the revolving door of justice has done, they may call it social justice, is actually give criminals opportunity to do more crime. Crime isn't up just because there are a lot of bad people. It's also up because the justice system is not putting them away.
Yeah. And where are they going to put them? Our prisons are already overloaded and overcrowded, and we don't have enough capacity. They have no choice but to turn them around or either build more and more prisons, and then they're trying to do that as well.
I'm not sure that they can admit that the system doesn't work because they don't have a viable alternative.
It's theirs.
And also, a lot of things that they do have unintended consequences. Like the governor of Illinois, right across the river, they're going to put together a big bill to take care of homeless people and do things. Doesn't that sound wonderful? But other states that have done that, guess what happened? Did the homeless problem go up or go down? The homeless crisis went up. You got more homeless. It's like whatever they do in their social justice, it makes things worse.
Liberalism always generates the exact opposite of its stated intent.
Well put.
Without
And now I want to talk about the last part of the ESG score. This came out of, people in Davos and other places are pushing it. It has to do with environmental, social justice, and green. And basically, it's channeling our investment money, maybe your retirement investment money, into those businesses that do what the environmental, earth-worshiping radicals want them to do, which is eventually is going to make it harder on the fossil fuel industry to get good investors. And many small businesses won't get good investors. And it puts the government bureaucrats in a chance to blackmail industry. And by the way, that's the definition of fascism. They use big businesses to enforce many of their rules.
Yeah, and every country right now that has a good ESG score is having riots and they're starving. So there's that.
Yeah, it doesn't work, actually. It doesn't work. It's sending money. See, normally investors, money goes to the most profitable, efficient, or the ones that have the best future efficiency. But now capital will be going to political causes instead of economic. That's a way to make people poorer.
Yeah.
It's going to bring America down.
Exactly.
A friend of mine posted today, I paid my $400 electric bill, so I'll now be comfortable to starve to death.
That's about it, too.
Starving comfort. Gotta learn how to eat
$400.
beans, right?
Wow.
And also, my last little bit is, if they do push us to a cashless society, won't that make it even easier for the government to run things? For instance, when Trudeau wanted to shut down the truckers, he froze their digital bank accounts.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's why they're doing it.
And there will be a justification that cash allows a black market society to thrive, and therefore it allows crime to continue happening. So if you get rid of that, medium of exchange, well, then it's going to be, it's going to be it's going to get more complicated for criminals. But it's not worth it. The cure is
They'll
worse than the
still
disease.
knock you on the head and take your stuff.
They've been using that logic, about the drug problem that comes into the United States, and we'll be able to crack down on this, illegal drugs coming in the country because they're getting paid in cash, and they're going to figure out a way around that system.
Of course.
Even if they have a digital society, they will figure out how they can turn it into wash that digital money through a corporation, and they'll still end up with their money.
There are enough corrupt politicians. Who knows what? I guarantee you, if we go cashless, crime will not dry up.
No.
Nor will the poor.
No. It could actually make it worse if they get politicians and bankers to cooperate. Do bribery and, I'm going to some more seedy things I could say, but we won't say those.
You mean what they're doing now? I mean, they're doing it all now. It's even documented and nobody cares. It's.
Well, we're going to continue this discussion because the things we didn't really get to cover today next week. And I hope you all will watch it. And I want to thank everybody who showed up.
Enjoyed it.
One thing I want to mention before we sign off is Pentecost. You want to tell them about the what's it called, Patty's Inn? It's going to be the weekend of Memorial Day, so you're going to want to get in early, and you want to call them. Don't try to register online because it'll show that it is full. So
yeah, and hopefully, if you don't wait too late, you'll get a room at a discounted rate, only a couple dollars more than last year, which is considered a good deal. Tell them you're with the ICG Church, Heartland Church of God, or mention my name, James Ricks, and they should, find you the deal. I think it's $71 for one bedroom, which in today's world, that's a good deal, and $99 for a 2 bedrooms and $124 for a suite. And it's May 27th is Saturday night when most people will be there. So I guess it's 26th through the 28th of May. And we're going to be at the wonderful yacht club called Green Turtle Bay.
Yep. And if you want to stay there, you can rent a cabin. They have different sizes of cabins, different prices of cabins. So
yeah, and we'll try to put out a letter about that. Remind me, Michael, put out a letter about Green Turtle Bay and Pentecost soon.
You got it.
And maybe put it on the church site, the Facebook site. So, all right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for everyone in the chat room. They had a big, long, good discussion tonight. And everyone, enjoy the rest of your Sabbath. And we'll see you back here again next week.
Good night.
Good night.
We're happy you could make it, and so glad you are here, and hope that we've been able to make God's word more clear. Until next time, may God be with you in everything you try. But for now, till next week, we have to say goodbye.